Hi everyone, I'm Stan from Eagle Vision and I'm here with Rob Davidov. Rob, welcome.
Hi Stan, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I've known Rob for probably about 8 or so years now, and Rob is the director of Davidov Architects, and I've always thought of him as a really creative interior designer as well as an architect, because he's got very bold style and very bold geometric forms, at the same time with very, refined palette and minimal style of the colors and how he goes about doing things. And I wanted to catch up with Rob and talk about how the developers should optimally think about interior design rather than just approaching it with a view of, well, the interior designer just comes along sometime down the track. And in this first episode, we'll talk about the relationship between architects and interior designers and where the optimal scenarios could be. So where do you see that relationship sit?
Well, I think we're in an interesting position because on some projects we work as the architect and the interior designer. On other projects we're the architect and we work in collaboration with an interior designer. And in others we work as the interior designer working with another architect.
Right.
So we've seen developments take place in lots of different prisms, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's given us good exposure to see how things can improve and how things can be done more efficiently and improve the way we operate.
Yeah.
But ideally, the relationship when there is an architect and an interior designer, it's very important that they're ideally brought together at the very beginning of a project.
Conception of it, yeah.
And at the conception, and they're able to work together on a common concept that's very strong. They've both got ownership of it, and then ideally before pen has even been brought to paper, there's an idea from both perspectives of how the interiors and the architecture are going to progress. And that's going to have impacts on the quality of the internal spaces, their relationship to the external spaces, and then also as simple as things like the use of materials internally and externally. There might be some materials that can go inside and out, but it'll already be a relationship there. So it's really trying to not see interiors as an afterthought, but seeing it as something that's absolutely integral to the design. So when we're doing both, for instance, there's really no distinction between where the architecture and the interiors start and end. And I think that's the ideal, and that can happen when there is an architect and there is an interior designer, as long as they've both been given the opportunity to contribute at the very beginning.
Yeah, and so let's say there are two firms working together in a collaboration. Where have you seen some developers, let's say, make mistakes when that team has been put together like that?
Well, if the team is brought together at the conception, then I think ideally you're going to be doing well. That said, you probably still do need someone to be driving it, but it needs to be clear and probably from the client that you have to work together. It might sound obvious, but I think it's important that everyone feels that they have the right to make big statements, and the interior design is not relegated just to
An afterthought.
or just designing the joinery or picking the interior colour scheme. It should be, and it needs to be in this market, far more involved than that.
Yeah.
But I think the big mistake is bringing the interior designer in far down the track, after town planning, or even once documentation has even started to take place. I think that's where the quality of the interiors will suffer, because they're really already going to be governed by the architecture that's already been designed.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in another episode, but we worked together on a project in Ewingsdale a little while ago, and that project came out with some beautiful work. So how did that come about that you were able to deliver that?
That project came about in that way because there was a very clear concept from the outset about what that house was going to be about, and that was brought from the inside and the outside at the same time. And that vision was backed up by a client who was very excited by those spaces and about those key concepts. And it really was a house in a rural setting, and we really wanted to play off ideas of vernacular Australian rural architecture and the interiors. So there was research, there was some benchmarking that was done, there was a lot of concepts, and that was in terms of the spaces, the functions and the materials, all had this link to the heritage of the area that they were located in, and that was driven from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, and I remember brought in a sunken lounge What was the thinking behind that concept?
The house was located on the crest of a hill, and it was important that views basically in a 360-degree orientation were maintained. So I felt that if we had, look, the living room, conventionally it would be blocking views from these two courtyard spaces which we had on either side of the house. So maintain that vision through the house, and that all of these windows can open up. I decided it might be a really beautiful idea to sink the lounge, so you're almost like nestled into the ground as well, and still having these beautiful views out while not restricting views from these two north and south courtyards.
In summary, cohesive project will happen when you've got a collaboration between the architect and interior designer and somebody driving the project.
Yeah.
That really is it. Excellent. Look, this is all that we have time for this episode, and in the next one we'll talk about, I guess, the case study where we've got a developer that has bought a project and then they have town planning already in place, and what an interior designer can do potentially, if anything, to bring across that project to a successful marketing outcome. Thank you for watching.